Hello everyone, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another stream. And today we are going to look into Angular and signals. So everybody welcome. I hope everybody is doing great. How are you? How is your weekend going? Right? Everything looks good to me. Let's also turn this one on. Hello, hello. Are you excited for today's topic? In this one we are quickly going to jump into a lot of things. So maybe yeah, we'll see then how this one goes. So let's see if I can put it on the screen as well. Da-da-da. There we go. There we go. So first of all, thank you again for joining. And as I said, we're going to be looking into Angular, and we are going to look into the signals API that the Angular is introducing, and everybody is hyped about it. Everybody is super interested into what signals are. So signals is something that SolidJS introduced the first time. And I think one of the interesting things was just the fact that it is not something that has been found recently, but essentially it is something that has been there for quite a while now. So SolidJS essentially started with that. Then I think React and Preact also got some implementation of this, and then now we have Angular. So आपने signals finally start कर दिया. Yes, सात खानज़ादा. Yes, we're gonna jump into it. We're going to build something really quick with that, and then we'll see how that goes. Raja ji, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Raja, is the stream okay on Twitch? Previously, we have had a bunch of issues with the streams, but I think now it's probably good. Hassan Siddiq, how can you handle error on an Express API? It depends on how your code is structured. So Raja says, nope. What do you mean by nope? Is everything good or is everything super bad? Can I double check on Twitch if it looks good? So is it bad on Twitch or is it good on Twitch? The screen is not visible. I have no clue why that happens. Maybe we're gonna try to do it like this. Let's see if I can find it. Save it. Restart it. I'm not really sure why that happens. On Twitch, it goes weird all the time. We'll see. Screen is not visible. That makes sense. I often have to just restart everything and then it works. So if it keeps doing that, then I would say just go to YouTube, or I'll just stop streaming to Twitch completely. But now it shows it as now that I've ended the stream. Now it shows it. So I'm not really sure if Twitch is being weird or what. No, I have no clue. We'll see. Anyways, so let's get into it. I would say just go to YouTube in this case, and we'll take it from there. So the first thing that we will look into is signals themselves, and we're going to look into how we can work with them. So let's start with a fresh application. So what I'm going to do is let's switch to this. So first of all, what I'll do is let's see if I can get everything good. So here we should have work. We should know. I think it should be personal. And then we could have cd YouTube. And then we could say, all right. So first of all, let's install the Angular CLI, but we are going to install it the latest version. So one of the things that you could do is if I go back here, let's see, give me 1 second. And if I go to here, you should be able to see that the npm package of Angular CLI, the latest version is 15.2.4, but essentially that's the stable version. If you want to see the next version, the coming up version, you can basically install the next, or you can install it via the package number. So I'm not really sure why that would happen. The course issue that Raja is mentioning, but let's not talk about that yet. We'll see. I'm going to be answering the questions in a bit. So how do I install the latest one? I could just go ahead and say something like, hey, do npm install. Let's zoom in a bit. So npm install dash g angular dash CLI. Excuse me. So this should install the Angular CLI's latest version, or not actually this one, but at next. So we get the latest one. So we want the latest version to be installed, and this is not the stable version. So be mindful that if you're trying out signals, it may not really be stable, or the APIs may change in this case. So now that we have this, we can basically type ng-v, and you should be able to see the version of Angular that we have installed now globally. Is it ng-version? You need to specify command before. Oh, interesting. So can I do, have they removed the version? Oh, it's ng version now. My bad. So ng, I'm gonna do clear ng version just to make sure that we have the latest one. So here you can see that we have the Angular version installed 16.00 next 4, and now we are good. So what we are going to do is we are going to install, or we are going to create a new Angular application. Let's call this wishlist. So I'm going to say ng new, and I'm going to call this app wishlist. And then I'm going to say this is going to have routing, and this is going to be a standalone application. So we do want to create a standalone app, and the style is going to be SCSS. So now that we have this application, let's have a quick look at what happens. It says standalone is not required. Interesting. Then I don't need it. Let's see. Does it create a standalone? No, it does not. Wait a second. Did I miss something? RMRF, wish list. I do need to go to the documentation. Let's have a look. So in here, Angular standalone app. So if I want to create a new app, do we have the schematics? I mean, I could just go ahead and create an app that is wait a second. Let's Google it. Angular CLI standalone app ng new. Let's see. But this is the issue that is there. Is this issue open right now? Okay, so this is open right now. Already in the backlog, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this PR is also available in the Angular CLI, but this is not merged yet. 5 days ago. So I think this is going to be available really soon, but it's not there yet. So we're going to still create an application, but not standalone. I'm looking at the questions now. How can you handle error on Express API? I'm using Axios to call the API. Is using error.response the right practice? Are you using error.response on the front end, or are you talking about the back end? So when you're trying to do it via Axios, I think you do have the error function with Axios as well. So you could use that. I would say look into Axios documentation, and you'll find a better answer than what we can give here, because we are not looking at the documentation right now. So I hope that makes sense. All right. So now that we have this, let's create the app without the standalone flag. So we are going to remove this. Let's create this. And for some reason now Twitch says that I'm live. I have no idea why. But have you already looked into the Angular standalone components? Have you worked with any standalone components so far, or have you worked with the Signals API yet? Type in the chat and let me know if you know what Signals are, or if you know what Angular standalone components are. So you can type in the chat, and that should be visible right here. And Chaudhry Farhan says Lahore Kalandars. Yay! Awesome. In the meantime, we'll just let this one finish. And then in the meantime, I'm also going to open this. So let's say code or CD, personal, YouTube. And here I can now say ls. and I can say something like code wish list. So we can open this into VS Code, and we have the packages installed successfully. So let's go here. I'm gonna actually make it grow, and then like this, and then I can go and do like this. All right, now that we have this, we can simply go ahead and say something like, let's see, we can say npm, or we do have the packages on here, so we can simply say npm start. So we do have the ngserve running as well, and then we are going to do some little changes. So what I'm going to do is we're going to convert this into a standalone component, so we are not really using anything from that. So what I could do is, let's say, see, so we do have the bootstrap using standalone. So I need to import this, and then I can simply do this, and then that should be good. But then I would also have to provide the router in this case. Yes. So now that we have the app running, I'm just gonna minimize this. So we have the app here. And in the main TS now, we do have the app module, which we are bootstrapping like this. So I do want to convert this into a standalone component that is being bootstrapped. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this shamelessly so we can import this from a platform browser. So here we do have bootstrap application. In this case, we're also going to say, all right, can I please go ahead and say import from, and here we can say app component, and then here we can basically import the app component, and then I can bootstrap the application just like this. So I could do something like this: bootstrap application app component, right? So the first thing that it takes is the component, and the second thing that it takes is the option. So if you look at here, we can provide the application, but then also the options. So we are going to provide the providers here. So here we can say something like, hey, please take some providers, and in here we can do something like provide router, and then I think it also takes the routes that we can define. So what I'm going to do now is take out the platform dynamic, take out this line from here, and then take out the app module from here. But now I do need to provide it some routes. So if I look at my application, you're going to see that, hey, it says, no, you cannot really work with that. Because we are providing router, we are getting rid of the app module here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove or delete this module, the app module, and in the component, I can go here and say standalone. Is it standalone? Is it standalone? No, wait a second. Here I could go ahead and say imports, and here I could say, no, not import, or yes, imports router module from Angular router, and then there should be a standalone true. So now if I save this, we have only one thing, and that is cannot bind to ng switch. That makes sense. So we do want to have a common module as well that we want to import. So I'm going to import it from Angular common, and now we have a compilation that is successful. So now we are basically running a standalone application. So maybe this could be a tutorial on its own, how to convert or how to bootstrap an application by not using any modules, but rather having a standalone component. This means no modules. Directly we have all the components. So if I try to go to the browser, let's see what happens. Not that one, this one. So if I go to localhost 4200, then we have the application running. Yay, awesome. So now that we have the app running, let's also define, should we define some routes, or should we just go ahead and do a simple signals application? Let's do a simple signal application. So no routes, empty routes, nothing at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this again, and I'm going to delete a lot of stuff from this one. So let's try to do this. So we keep the router outlet in the app component, and then I essentially go and delete a lot of stuff but not the main. So let's see if I have the main in here. So we have the div that has content and then main, and then everything is inside there. So I'm going to keep this main here, and then I'm going to also keep the toolbar, but in the main, I'm going to empty everything. So inside main, I'm going to delete everything inside main. So links, blah, 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 footer, blah, 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 clouds, all of it, main becomes empty. So there's nothing in the class content role main. I would rather also change this to main to keep this more semantic. And this toolbar, this would be header because I want to use semantic HTML and not, yeah, not divs everywhere. So now that we have this, you can see we only have welcome and some links here. So let's quickly go ahead and change some of the things. For example, inside of welcome, we could say Angular with signals, or we rather could say Angular wish list with signals. Okay. Now the question is, do you want me to work with Tailwind CSS or do you want me to work with regular CSS? And you can type in the chat and we can take it from there. So regular CSS or Tailwind CSS. Pick one. And in the meantime, I can just configure some things. So we do have the app here. And what I want to do, if I look at this correctly, so how about we increase this a bit here and also just decrease the width. So we do get a bit more space, and we should also have a bit more space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go ahead and install Tailwind CSS because I think I would use Tailwind in any case. Raja says Tailwind, so we're going to go with Tailwind. So framework guidelines, I'm going to go with Angular here. So I have Angular here. So I have already created the application. This is what I need to do more. So I'm going to go back, open terminal, open a new terminal. And inside here, I'm going to first install Tailwind CSS, post CSS, auto prefixer. And then I'm going to copy the other command as well, npx tailwind css init. So I'm going to now do this. And this will create a Tailwind CSS or config.js or Tailwind config.js, just like this. And then I need to update the content with this. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and update this just like this. And now I need to import this into my Tailwind base. So yeah, absolutely, Sheikh Salman, go to YouTube. I would say because Twitch is behaving a bit weird for me. So now that we have this here, I'm going to go to my style.scss, and in here I have imported the base CSS. Now I do need to restart my server so I can essentially work with this. What I really love about Angular's recent versions is how quick it has become compared to how it was before. So now if I try to see any styles, you're going to see that I should be able to work with first Tailwind CSS. So let's say if I start working on the main route, let's create some dummy URL, or not dummy URL, but some dummy code. So let's say we have a bunch of headings. So I could say something like h2 here. I could say something like Angular wish list, right? So here you can see that I could also now say text or class and then text to XL. And if I do this, you can see that we are able to apply the styles. You know, I love the font that is Nunito. So I'm going to add that. So Google font Nunito. And in here, I can quickly go ahead and copy this. So I have the link tag. I can copy this. I can go to the index.html, and inside here, I can paste the links. So I'm adding the font here, and all that is remaining is to apply this here, the font family, just like this. So now I'm going to go to my style CSS, and here I can say HTML body, and here I can say font family Nunito. I'm just going to make sure that I have the box sizing set to everything. So I could say box sizing border box, just to make sure. And now if I go to my application, you see, you should be able to see that we have everything that has a font, but I have a problem. I do have some styles in app HTML which override my font family. So let's say font family. Yeah, here it is. So I'm going to remove this from here. And now if you see, you can see that we do have the the Nunito font here. So it is this rounded, nice little font. So you can see that this is the font that we are using, and it is the same as here. All right, so now that we have got this, let's start creating the components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component for, let's say, for wish list, and then we are going to create more components. So I'm going to say something like ngGC components. So I'm creating a new folder components just by typing into the CLI and not having to create the folder myself. So Angular is smart enough, or the CLI is smart enough to manage it automatically. So I'm going to say ngGC components, and here I'm going to say wish list. All right, or you could say wish list box, something like that. And in this one, let's call it wish list. So now that we have this, I'm going to just create it. Or actually, one more thing, I want this to be standalone. So a standalone component. So we can work with that. And then also, because I'm not adding this to any module, I'm just going to keep everything standalone in this case. Now what I can do is I'm going to also add another component. I'm going to call it wishlist item. So I do want to show a bunch of items on the UI, and I'm going to create that. Apart from that, I'm also going to say something like add wishlist or new wishlist form instead. So we do have the new wishlist form that we can also work with. So just by typing these three commands, I now have three components. We do have the new wishlist form, we do have the wishlist, and then we have the wishlist item. So I do want to keep this as a container component, the wishlist component. So I'm going to work with that. So in the app component, I'm going to go all the way down here. And what I don't really like about app component right now is that I have this bunch of CSS, which is just standing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rather just cut it and move it to the CSS file. Yes, I'm not a very big fan of just keeping everything in one file. I don't like scrolling all this much. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove all the styles from here. Now I think I like this file much more, and I can put everything inside this CSS. I'm going to save all the files and see if everything works. Yes, it works. So we do have Angular wishlist heading here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the heading inside the wishlist component. So in here, I'm going to, instead of wishlist works, I'm going to just say Angular wishlist. If I go back to my app, I don't see it. And that is because my app component does not use anything, does not import this wishlist, or does not use it. So I'm going to create the app wishlist here. And I know that the selector is app wishlist because if I go to the component here, I can see that the selector here is app wishlist. So I can use this tag here. But the problem is that it says, no, you really cannot, because app does not know about this wishlist component, because there are two different components. One is somewhere else. The second one is somewhere else. So we need to let know this app component what is the wishlist component. So I'm going to go to the TypeScript file, and in here in the imports, I can now add the wishlist component just like this. So I'm importing this, adding to the imports, and if I go to the HTML now, yay, this is happy. So I can save this here, I can save this here, and now you can see the heading. So if I inspect it, you're going to be able to see that, hey, we have this. If you look at here, we do have the app root. Inside that, we got the header, we got the main, and then we have the app wishlist that has the heading. Make sense? Yep, it does. So now we can work in the wishlist component to show the rest of the things. So let's suppose we have a type of wishlist that we want to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go and create a wishlist interface that I can start working with. So I'm going to quickly go and say something like, hey, I have a new folder called interfaces. Inside that, we could have a interface. You could call it interfaces. You could call it also type. So I think it's up to you. Let's call them interfaces for now. So I'm going to go and say something like wishlist.interface.ts. And in here, I can say export interface wishlist item. And here, wishlist item could have a text that is supposed to be a string. It could also have an ID that could be a string as well. And then we could also have a done that is Boolean in this case, right? So we do have an interface that we can now follow. So now that we have this, I could say, all right, this wishlist component is going to have an array of wishlist items. So you could say wishlist array. And here you could have it like this, but you would also want to define the type here. So you could say that this is of type wishlist item, an array of wishlist item, and here I can now add stuff. So what's great about this is that now the TypeScript understands this. I can now start typing the properties. So I can say TE, and you can see that it says, hey, a wishlist item has a text. So let's say we could say something like groceries, or we could say, I don't know, maybe Angular cookbook. And here it could have an ID. So let's say ID 21 or 23 even. And then we also have the done, that is, for example, false. So I have this as a wishlist item. I could also make some copies of it. So I'm able to first show that. So second edition, for example, the ID could be 25. And then we could also have something like groceries. And here it could be 31 and done false maybe. Okay. So now that I have this, I can now render the wishlist items. So right now there's nothing on the UI. So what I would do is I would say, all right, I need to show this wishlist item however many times I have this wishlist array, or how many items are here. I want a wishlist item to be rendered. So what I'm going to do is in the wishlist, in here, after the heading, I'm going to create a section, or I'm going to say section. And here I could also say wishlist items. So I have a wishlist items class on the section. Then I could go ahead and say something like, now I'm going to have a app wishlist item. I know this because each wishlist item should have this selector. So if I copy this, you can see that wishlist item TypeScript's definition says, hey, this is app wishlist item. If I paste this, exactly the same thing. But then we have the same problem. The wish list does not know about this component, item components. So you would do the same. In the wish list, you're going to import here. We have the imports here. So I could import here the wish list item component. So if I do this, now my TypeScript should be okay. So you can see I have the wishlist item here that I can see. If I go to the browser now, you can see it says wishlist item works. Yay! We do have the app wishlist in here, which has the heading, and then it has a section. And inside here, we have one wishlist item. We don't want one. We need more than one. So in this case, I'm going to actually loop over all the items. So I can say ng4. And in here, I could say let item of wishlist array, or wishlist array here. And in here, you can see that I could also say wishlist or WL item, for example, wishlist item. And if I save now, you can see I get 3. That is because I have 3 wishlist items now. If I am right, I don't have the Angular extension. Ooh, we should install Angular Chrome extension, Angular DevTools. So I should have, no, I should have it. I would have enabled or disabled that because of testing. So now that I have this, let's try this out. So if I go here, try it with Angular, let's see. So I can actually see all the components. So I have app root, I have wishlist, item 1, item 2, item 3, as you can see here. And I can click and see a lot of information about that as well. Open source, no, not needed. All right, everybody with me so far? Are you excited? Do you think this is exciting? Do you think so far so good? Now, what I want to do is to actually render the actual wishlist item rather than this hard-coded text that says wishlist items work. So I have all my array inside this wishlist array. So if I click app wishlist, you can see that I have the array right here. So I have 3 items in the array, but I don't want it here. I do want this wishlist array to have somehow passed and each item to their own component. So if I want to do that, I'm going to pass them as inputs. That means that this wishlist item should be able to accept inputs. So what I would do is first I would pass the input, just assuming that it's going to accept it. So if I go to the template, I can say, all right, I'm going to pass it as an item property. And in here, I'm going to say something like, hey, item, I'm going to pass you the wishlist item, each item from the iteration or the loop that I'm running right now. If I save this, it's going to start breaking everything because this wishlist item does not accept an input so far. So we are going to go to the wishlist item just like this, control click. And here I can define an input. So I can say input and I can say WL or I can say item. This item is going to be of type wishlist item. And that's pretty much it. And you can define it like this. So we are going to pass this item and it's going to be there always. Now that I have this, I have the luxury to now go here in the template where it says wishlist item works. I can now actually have the actual implementation. How do I know that? Because if I go to the Angular extension now, you can see that each wishlist item now has this item. Yay! So you can see the first one has the text Angular cookbook, the second one has the text Angular cookbook second edition, and the third one has the last one, that is groceries. So all I need to do is just to use this into the template. So I'm going to quickly go, and in the template, I can create now a wishlist item. I'm going to say, all right, this is wishlist item. So I can add a bunch of classes to it. I could style this in the CSS as well. I could also style it here in the template as well. I'm going to actually style it right here. So let's say this is going to have a width full. I'm also going to have a border, and I'm going to have a border slate a bit lighter, let's say 300, or actually a gray of 300, and then rounded MD and padding of Y 2, padding X 3. And now what I can do here is, instead of div, I'm going to have this as an article. And inside here, now I can put the information. So I can say H3 is going to be the title. So I can say, all right, I'm going to show the item dot text here. So if I save this now, you can see that I already got this item. Super cool, right? So you can see that it's pretty easy to create with Tailwind CSS as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to go ahead and say, hey, in this particular situation, I also want to have some sort of gap between those things. So if I go to the wishlist component here, and here I can say, all right, this is going to be flex and flex column. And then also I'm going to have a gap of 4, which means gap of 16 pixels. So if I save this now, you can see that we get the gap here. I'm also going to say this text is going to have a margin bottom of 4. So we have a gap here as well, and now a gap between this as well. I think the gap here is too much. Maybe change it to 3. And yeah, I think this is much better. And now that we have the text, I can also say if this is marked as done or not. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly go ahead and say, hey, let's put a checkbox in here that could say this is done. So this is going to be a widthful, but also a flex. And then I'm going to have a checkbox here. So we could have a input type checkbox. And in here, I could now say something like, let's see. So in here, you can see we got the checkbox, but I also want to have this as a justify between. And in here, I could also have sort of a gap that is of 4. So we got this gap, as you can see right here. And now that I have this, I should also say something like, because one thing that I'm thinking about right now is if I go here and change this to like X, Y, or X1, 2, 3, this all becomes pretty small. So I would want this wishlist item component to be at least a size. So we could say, all right, this wishlist component, this whole thing, the section that we have, should have a minimum width of, can I do SM? No. Or we could say something like width or max width SM? No. Let's see actually. Min with min content. I don't really want to have that. So maybe we could do minimum width SM. Let's see. So if I do this, then it takes all. No, I don't think this is going to work. So we would either have to give this a width. Maybe we could have something like 300 pixel, but then it would take at least 300 pixels. So maybe I would go to 250 pixel, something like this, and then keep it like that for now. And if I go and do something like, hey, I have 1, 2, 3, then it would still have something like a 250. Or we could also say just B250. So we could say something like width 100%. No, let's keep it like this for now. So minimum width 250. All right. So now that I have this, I could also say on this each item, wishlist item, I could also go ahead and say, hey, you can actually have a Now this becomes really interesting. I do want to be able to click the whole item to make this done or not. And what I want to do is to be able to also see if this is okay. So let's say if I go here and say checked, it's going to be if the item is done. So if I do this, let's see. So the last one, the last item that we have in the wishlist component is false. Let's make this true. So now you can see that this one is already done. I want to be able to click through the entire element and then be able to actually show that. So I'm thinking maybe what I could do is if I go inside the wish list and then the wish list item, the wish list item, then I would have to say, hey, if this element is clicked, we're supposed to, we are supposed to change the item done. So I could actually say something like, hey, I could say host binding or host, is it host listener? Click. So if I have a click event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, item click that takes an event. We don't really need to have an event because I'm just going to toggle everything. So in this case, I could say something like, hey, item dot done equals not item dot done or this dot item dot done. And if I now click here, you can see that I can toggle it. I can click anywhere because I use the host listener. I would also want to go and have a cursor pointer here. So let's do a cursor pointer. So now I can do this. I would also want to have some sort of, I don't know, highlight to it. So if I hover, I could say something like border, purple, I don't know, 500. So you can see that it becomes something like this. I think that's good. We could also say something like if this is done or not, and then we have some sort of text or a strike through. So let's say that we could say something like, hey, ng class, and in here I could say something like, let's say done. If item dot done is true. And I would also maybe use BEM here. So I'm going to say this is wishlist item. But then if I have the wishlist, if I have item dot done, then I would say done like this. And then I can style it here. So I can say, hey, if you have a wishlist item and then it's done, then what I would do is I would have the item inside, and that was the H3. Yeah. Then I would have the H3 having text decoration line through. So in this case, you can see that now this one is line through. I would also maybe have the element itself having a opacity of lesser, maybe 0.7. So you can see this is a bit lighter now. And maybe, I don't know, 5, much lighter. And then if I hover over it, then I would say the border, we could say something like apply. So here I'm using Tailwind CSS. I would say border, I think gray, and I think it was 300. So in this case, you can see that if I mouse over on this, the border still remains the same, but the other ones, they get triggered. All right. So you can see that this is super cool. One of the things that I want to do is in the case where we have this element, now there's one problem. The one problem with this styling is, and this is becoming more of a UI rather than actually the signals, but I think I would still go with that. So you can still learn the UI plus the signals as well. So what I'm going to do rather is if I have a look at the wish list here and here, what I would rather do is I would go ahead and apply a style to the parent since I'm using flex. So what I want to do is look at this. If I mark something, I want it to be at the bottom. So what I would do is in this wishlist item, if I add a style that is order 1, then you can see that this moves forward. And the reason for that is by default, the order for every particular element is 0. So if I give something 1, it goes all the way down. If I click this now, you can see that it's still here. So if I give this element order 1 as well, if I say, all right, this wishlist item is going to have order 1, then that goes down as well. So I want to be able to apply to this root, or this, not root, but this component, which is the host component, and not to the article. So I cannot really apply this to the article. I want it to apply to this host component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go here, and then here I can say something like host binding. And here I think I would have to say, let's see, I'm going to have to Google this one now. Host binding CSS style Angular. And that's going to be style.background. So then I can say something like, hey, style dot order. And in this case, I can say get. No, this should be something like, I think I can use a get. And then here it should be order. And then here I can say return. And then I can say if this dot item dot done, if that's true, then you get 1, otherwise you get 0. Okay, so if I do this, I think it should work automatically. So let's see, if I click this, yay, you can see that it goes automatically down the stair. So if I click this and check the wishlist item, you're gonna see that here I already have the order 1 applied. I'm gonna refresh just to make sure that I'm not tripping. So if I click Angular Cookbook, yay, it goes down there. So I can go here, check the app wishlist item, and we have the order 1. So now that we have this, let's talk about just having this with signals. So, or actually being able to also add items to signal, and also being able to show some values, for example, in there. So what I do want to do is, let's see. So we got the new wishlist form. We're going to quickly also render it and add it. So I want to add this to the wishlist component. So we have the section, but we should also have a section for adding a new wishlist. So here I could say class add new wishlist, and inside here I can say app, and I don't have it here in the wishlist component, so I have to import it. So I have the wishlist item component, but I also want the add wishlist. Is it add wishlist? No, it's new wishlist form component. So I want this component to also be rendered. So I can say here app new wishlist form, and I have this now. So you can see here it says new wishlist form works. If I go to Angular, I can see my root wishlist. Inside we have this form which we have to build, and then we have the wishlist item that has the article. So here you can see all of the items. I really love the extension. So now that we have the form here, let's quickly render it. So I'm going to quickly go here and say, all right, this is going to be a form. Inside here, we should have some sort of, let's see. We could have, we're going to say on submit, we're going to apply something here, but we'll see. Or not on submit, it's ng submit as far as I remember, but we'll look into it. So in this form, we should only have an input or a text area, so to say, that could have some rows. So let's go ahead and say rows 3. And then here I could say style. So class, we could have a bit similar style as what we have for the wishlist item, but not exactly the same. So let's actually copy paste from there. So I'm going to go here and say, hey, wishlist item with full blah, blah, blah. So we do this, and then here we apply this. We would want to have not cursor pointer, no flex needed, no justify between. We do want a border. We do want the other things as well, but the py has to be 1.5. The p, or actually it has to be 1. The px can be 1.5, 1.5. So now you see that we got this text here, and here we can also add the placeholder that says, can I format this? No. Yes, I can. So I can say something like, hey, placeholder is enter your wish, enter a new item. So you can have a enter new item, and then you could have a button that says add. So a button that says add. This should have a class of, I don't know, width full, py2, px3, rounded, md. It could also have a background purple. I would go with, let's say, 700. So now we have this, but this here. Now we could go ahead and say the color, or sorry, the text is gonna be white. So we get this, and then we could also have something like hover. On hover, we want the color to change. So BG purple, but then a bit lighter. So maybe 600. So now you see that this changes when we do this. And then also what I want this form to have is a class that has MB4. So we also have some sort of margin here. So now that we have this, I could add something and then it would be added here, but I need to be able to do it with just a bit. So now the question is, can I, and this is the first time I'm trying it. So can I do everything with signals, and or would I have to work with something else? And that's an interesting thing for me. So maybe I can use it with signals. Maybe I would have to work with a particular service. Maybe I would not have to do anything at all. So in this particular situation, we could either use input outputs, or we could use a service that contains the signal, and then we can take it from there. So what would you want to do in this case? Should we create a service with the signals, or should we handle it with input output? What do you think? I think if we do it with a service, it might be more interesting than just working with this, to be honest. Because then every service is talking, no, every component is talking to the service, and the service has the signal, and everything works magically. So maybe we can create a service and then have a signal in that. Let's do that actually. So I'm going to say ng generate service wish list service. So maybe let's go with a service, and here I'm going to quickly create that. All right, so now that we have the wish list service here, you can see it right here. And now what I can do is I can create a signal here. So we could say something like wish list array, and then we're going to have a signal, and you can see I can import this from the Angular core. And what does it take? It takes the initial value that you want to put it. So I'm going to provide the initial value here. So I'm going to actually remove the array that we have in the wishlist component, which is in the wishlist box right here. So I'm going to remove it from here, make it empty, and then I'm going to move it inside the service that we created. So I'm going to go to wishlist service, and I'm going to move it here. So we have now got a signal that has an initial set of data. I could also have moved this to, I don't know, maybe something else. Let's say I move it to something else. So let's create a new constant. So we can say, all right, dummy data.ts, and we could say export dummy wishlist, and here we can say this. So we are exporting it from here, export const dummy wishlist. And then I could actually use this array in the service. So I could say, hey, can I please use this? Yes, I can. So I'm creating it with a dummy wishlist array, and then I have this as a signal. So what I can do now is I can use this service to actually render this array. How would I do it? I'm going to go to, in this case, the wishlist component, which now has an empty array. This was not what was planned. So I have nothing to show on the UI. Boom, nothing. App wishlist, wishlist form, no wishlist. So here we can inject the service. So we can say something like wishlist, or we could either, all right, let's do it directly. So I could say something like, hey, we do have the wishlist service. Let's do it in 2 simple steps. I'm going to inject the wishlist service. And in here, I'm going to say, hey, this one is this.wishlist service.wishlist array. And now, if you have a look at that, now it is not really happy, because now we have the settable signal is missing the following properties, because now this is not really what we are assigning. But what we would have to do is to call this method, because the way signals would work is that now it's going to return a settable signal to us that we can now use to render this, if I'm correct. So I should be able to get the signal and then should be able to set the value there. So what I'm going to do rather in this case is I'm going to remove this from here, and then I'm going to change or infer the type from here. So let's say in this case, I think this should also be possible for me to give this a generic. So here, when I'm defining the signals, I can say this is going to be of wishlist item array in this case, and this is also supposed to have this type wishlist item array. So this is happy. This one is not happy because I'm using an array inside an array. So this should be rather this. And now this should be happy. So I'm saying, all right, signal, you have a wishlist item, you have a dummy wishlist array, please initialize with that. Then I go to my wishlist component here, and in here I can now say, all right, is it wishlist item? So if I say the wishlist array, you can see that now this makes sense because this is a signal and I'm assigning this to the wishlist array in this case. So now that I've assigned this, if I go, yay, you can see now we have the Angular Cookbook and the Angular Cookbook second edition and the groceries. Nuno Aruda says, can the signal infer the types? I think just like every different variable in TypeScript, you could infer the types. For example, if I go ahead and remove this, now this infers the type. But in this case, you would have to make sure that you're providing the type here. Can I remove it from here? I think yes. And now you have the type from here as well. So the key would be to providing it at the initial variable. But yes, good point. We can actually remove it from a lot of places in this case. I just like to make sure that we have them. So when I'm reading, I can actually see, all right, what type am I using there? But yeah, you're absolutely right. So now if I go back to my wishlist component, you can see that I don't really need to have the type here. I can see that this is of wishlist item type. Okay, so now that we have the wishlist service and we have the wishlist array working here as well, now let's talk about how can we add a new variable to from the wishlist form. So in this case, I could either use, I don't know, I could either use, or actually let's use the on submit here. So I could say something ng submit, if I'm correct. And then here I could say something like, hey, sorry, this should be ng submit. Or I could also use submit in this case. When we submit the form, we could go here and say something like add new item. And in here, I could now say something like, hey, const new item, which is supposed to be of wishlist item, is, I could have the ID. The ID, I could probably say something like crypto dot get or random UUID. Then I could say text is going to be what I get from the input. So I can create a variable here and use a template driven form. I could also use reactive forms here, but I could make this simple and just use maybe template driven form. So here I could say something like, hey, I have a item text here, which is the text area, and I can now call this function. So in this one, we have the add new item. So I'm going to call this function with the item text element dot value. Okay, so I can pass this, which means here I would have a text of type string when I do this, and then I can say text here, and then I can say done is going to be false. So now that we have the new item here, I'm going to just console log it so we can first see it, and then we'll take it from there. So new item is going to be here and is going to be here. So now if I try to do something like blah, 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 hit enter, let's see, and no. I would also have to pass. So whenever you submit the form, you would have the problem of the page refreshing because HTML form works like that. So you also need to pass the event. So you can do something like event.prevent default. So I'm going to quickly go here, add here. We have event. We could say form sub, or I think it's submit event. And then here you can do e.prevent default, so I don't have to refresh the page. And now if I type something, hit add, you can see the new item. If I hit enter, it doesn't really work because this is a text area. So I could type something, hit add, and I can see all the values here. So we have random ID, we do have the text, we do have the done that is set to false. Now the only thing is actually setting the value. So I need the service here in order to set the signal. So I can say something like wishlist service, and here I could say inject wishlist service, something like this. And then here, when I'm trying to add something new to the array, I'm going to actually push it to the top. So I'm going to say something like, hey, the wishlist service dot, this is supposed to be this dot wishlist service dot, and here I say wishlist array. Now I could use the set method to actually set the new value. That is one of the things that you could do. So I could go here and say, all right, can I please get the previous value? So I could get all the previous value, but then I would add it before it. So I'm going to actually create a new array in the set, something like this. And this is just to make sure that we are not mutating the original array. So we say, all right, get the new item, push it before the existing array and set it. So now if I try to do something like, hey, let's say homework, and if I hit add, it puts it here, but then does it also go and change it there? Let's see. So now if I go ahead and check it, source here, let's see. So I'm going to go to wishlist.component. No, it was the new wishlist form component. And then here we have this, and we have the new item here as well. Okay. With the service that we created, I'm just going to make sure that this is provided in root. Yes, this is provided in root, and this is a signal that we can also get. Cool. Then what I want to do is I could type something here and then hit add. It comes here, it gets the new item, and it also tries to get the previous one. And we also have the set here that we are trying to get. But then the problem would be towards the other side. Yes, the problem is if I go back to the wishlist component, which takes the array, the problem is I would have to take this as a signal and not assign it to, I would have to not assign it the value of it, but rather the signal. And then I would have to render the value here by calling it. So in here, it should rather have been like this. Let's try this out now. And if I go here, and there you go. So the problem is when I try to do this here, I'm saying get me the value of the signal and assign it here. This only happened once. So if this one is just an array, when I update the signal, it's not going to reassign the value, but rather I want this to be the signal and I can use it in my template. So what Angular does is as soon as you change the signal, it's going to recall, or it's essentially going to re-get the value and then render it. So the proper way of doing this would be to assign the signal here and then getting the value out of it like this. So I think we are good there. So I could say something like blah, 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 hit add. And if I go ahead and say something like this, and now you can see that we do have the new value that we create here. I could add it again and again, and it all works. I could also go ahead and make sure that when I add a new wishlist item, I do change or reset the form. So we do have the E here. So I could say E dot target dot, let's do it like this. Target equals to E dot target. And here I could say as HTML form element target.reset, which means that I'm resetting the value of the form. So now if I go and type something, hit add, you can see the form gets resetted, and I also get the value here. So blah, 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 gets added. Cool. Looks good to me. Now we're going to go one step up. So we understood two things so far, if I summarize for you now. The first thing is, in order to get a value of a signal, which is the wishlist array, which is a signal right now, you need to call the method like this to get its value. This is the first thing that we have. The second thing is that if you want to set a new value to the signal, you can do it by using the set method on the same signal. So we have a settable signal in which you can use the set method, which directly sets the signal to a new value and notifies all the dependents. So you can see that once we do it here to the service, it does it all the way to the other side. Hey Arijit, how's it going, man? Long time no see. For me, it's good. Thank you for asking. And I'm also gonna see. All right, the battery is just about to die, so I'm gonna change the camera. Give me 1 second. Alrighty, let's see. Thank you, Arijit. I highly appreciate it. All right, so now we have done two things: just get the value and set the value. Now the part is where we are actually discussing signals. But let's introduce an interesting approach here. What if I wanted to show how many of these I have marked as done, for example? Now that's going to be tricky because I need to be able to see how many items are done, and just having that information, I think it's going to be really helpful for me. So if I have especially a lot of items, so let's say that in the wishlist component where we have, if I go here, maybe show it here, it makes more sense. So now we have the wishlist component that has the form and a bunch of wishlist items, right? What I want to do is to be able to also just below the form, I want to show a count that says, all right, this many items out of this many items, right? So if I wanted to do that, I would actually go in the wishlist component and add a new property. I would say something like, hey, do I have something like, I don't know, finished count, all right? And then I could also have the array as well. So in here, I could do something like, hey, do I have, I mean, I could do it on init as well, or I could do it right here. I don't really think it really matters, but let's say we do it right here. So we would say something like this dot wishlist array, and then here I get the list or the array here, and then I do filter, and then I would say, all right, how many items do I have which really are done? So if I wanted to do it, I would rather move it into, let's move it into an ng on init maybe. So I would say something like implements, and here I could say on init, and then I'll move it inside here. So let's say the finish count by default is 0, and then here I could go ahead and say something like ng on init, and here I would say this dot or finish, this dot finish count equals this dot which is our array dot filter, and in here now I can say something like, hey, I get the item, all right, and then I check item dot done. If the done is true, then I just want to take out the length of such an array, and that's pretty much it. And then I have the finish count. Now that I have this value here, I could go and check here. So I could say, all right, just below the add new wish list, I'm going to have another section. In this, we could say something like finished count. And in here, all I have is just a bunch of text here. So I could say something like, hey, this could actually be a p tag, which could have the finished count. So I could say something like, hey, finished count, and then slash, and then I would say the same thing. So in here, we have the wishlist array. So we could have something like, hey, please have a wishlist array dot length done, something like this, right? So now if you can see 1 out of 3 done. If I add one more, oops, does not change. Now I have a problem. I have to keep track of this and change it every time. But I still have something. So I would also keep this flags, items center, and then also justify end. So I see it towards the end side of it. Yay, there we go. And I also would want to have a margin bottom of 4 on this one. So we have some margin, and here now you can see this. So having said that, I'm going to take a question from the chat. Hey, I'm good too, meeting you after a long time. It was a long vacation. I'm back now, back to my daily schedule. Hey, sounds nice. Have you used GPT-4? I have not yet. I did get the subscription for it yesterday, but I still have yet to explore it further. I have not done it yet. But yes. Okay, so now that we have this count here, how do we make sure that when we update it, it gets updated? For example, if I mark or unmark anything, I want this to be changed, right? This has to be reactive. What is the point of signals if it's not really reactive? So signals do have the possibility of having a computed value or a derived value. And this finished count is actually a derived value. So what I can actually do is I can go here and say, instead of this, actually, what I could do is I could put this into something called computed. So the computed comes from Angular core, which is a part of the Signal API. This takes a function and then you return a value. So I'm going to actually just return from this one. I can actually go ahead and say return and then do whatever I was doing before. Now the problem with this is a signal number is not assignable to type number because this finish count cannot be a number now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the type of this. So I'm going to say finish count is going to be of type a signal of number, right? And then here I can go ahead and say, all right, now you can see that it infers the value and sets it automatically. Now the only thing that remains is for me to change my template. So I'm not really using finished count like this. You can see it says function native code. No, that's not really what I wanted. So I'm going to actually call this signal so I can get the value out of it. So if I see now, you can see that it says 1, 3 done. The thing is, if I click this, do you see anything happening? No. But if I try to add another item, you see that now it works. So if I refresh now and add a new item, you can see that it updates the value automatically as I'm doing it, although it does not do anything when I do this. And the reason for that is this change is actually just a UI change and nothing changes on the signal. So if I go back to my wishlist item component, which actually triggers this toggle, this is here. So if I click on the item, we mark the item as done or not done, but essentially that doesn't really change the value of the signal item. So what we would have to do here is to inject the service. So we could say push list service. And here I could say equals inject wish list service. And then I could do something like, hey, I'm going to have to find the item that I want to mark as done. And then I want to use it. That is one thing that I could do. Another thing could be that I could pass the signal itself as input. I have not tried it yet, but who knows? Maybe it's still going to work. But that would only be possible if I pass the item as a computed value or something. I have not tried it. I'm not going to try it right now because it's about 50 minutes-ish of this video. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do it I'm not really sure if the right way, but I'm still going to do it the way I know. So how do we do it? I'm going to say, all right, whenever you have the item click, I'm going to actually go ahead and say that this dot wishlist service dot wish array, and I'm going to set it. I'm going to set it to the value from the existing array. So I'm going to say, hey, please get the current value. So I'm going to say, does the set actually get the value? Does it have more overloads than one? No, it just takes the value and sets it. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to say wishlist array, blah, blah, blah. Oops. Then I can do something like dot map. And in here, I can say, all right, I'm going to get the item or each item. And then I'm going to say, hey, if the item.id meets this .item.id, then I'm going to return something like this. So I'm going to say, hey, this dot, wait a second. I'm going to say return item done. Oops, done. And here I can say not item.done. So this could be one thing. If that's not the case, then we just return back the item. Okay. So we are saying, all right, hey, check the entire wish list. Try to find the element that we have. If we find it, then we change the done to its reverse value. If we don't have the current item as the item that we want to look at, then just return the item. And then we can actually remove this now, I believe. I'm going to just comment this out to check if this works. So now if I mark something as done, yay, you can see that this works. Because when we try to mark this as done, we get the new value. So if I show you, if I click the Angular cookbook, you see here, this one changes because the element now changes. So if I look at the item itself, you can see that the done is set to true. And if I unmark it again, let's say, let's do Angular cookbook. Now we got the Angular cookbook that if I click this, you can see the items done is not really. Ooh, why doesn't it show it? That's interesting. That's a bit sneaky. Does this open? Yes. Does this open? Yes. Now it does. So the done is false in this case. But you know that now if I want to add an item, I get the computed value just like this. And if I have to mark an item, it also updates in real time. So the signal is making sure that everything is working. The good part here is that there is no sort of output communication or anything as such. The direction of the data is sort of unidirectional that you can use. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So here you can see all the items work pretty nicely in this case. So now that we have this, the last thing I wanted to show you was the effect. So we discussed about 3 things so far. I'm going to just repeat them quickly. The first thing was that we are able to get the wishlist array as a signal and the value of it using the method. The second thing is that when we add a new wishlist item, we use the set method to add the new item into the array. The third thing we looked at was when we update a particular item, we also use the set method to update the item in the array. So essentially we update the wishlist array ourselves. And the final thing I want to show is an effect that we can use to save this data, let's say to the local storage whenever anything changes in a particular array. So what I would want to do is I would want to go to the service, and I think this part is supposed to be really easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an effect. So I could say something like local storage saver equals, and I should be able to say something like effect. If I take it from the Angular core, I think this is the signal effect. So create a global effect for the given reactive function. So in this one, what I really want to do is I want to say, hey, whenever this wishlist array changes, save that to the local storage. So I would go ahead and say something like, hey, local storage dot set item, let's define a key. So here I could say something like the local storage key is going to be ng wish list, let's say. So now I can say something like set item this dot local storage key, and then what I want to do is I want to be able to set the entire value of this signal wishlist array. So here I could say something like this dot wishlist array, and that is it. I need to change that to json.stringify and then this value, and this means that whenever now the wishlist array changes, it will set this automatically to the local storage. So let's see if this works. So if I save this now, go to my application here, go to local storage, and you can already see that I got this ng wishlist. How did this get here? Because as soon as it sets the value for the first time, it goes ahead and adds this automatically to the local storage. If I add something new literally, then I'm going to add this and boom, look at that. This automatically got added to the local storage. So the effect is so powerful. I'm just hooking into the signal using the use effect, or not the use effect. It's my React brain triggering it. Sorry, Angular peeps, sorry. But essentially it is getting it from our dummy data and it gets added to the local storage automatically. And now this is going to be super helpful. So far what happens is that I have this dummy wish list, and whenever the app starts, I initialize my wishlist service with this. But what if I already have something in the local storage, and I should rather use that? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the initial value of this to something like, hey, local storage dot Or actually we could say something like in the constructor. So let's make this something like a signal that would be of wish list item. And then here I could say something like, hey, or actually I can remove it because I'm setting this in the constructor. So here I could say this dot wish list array. And before that I can get the array here. So we could say wish list items equals, and here I could say local storage, or can I get it? Let's do it like this. Get wishlist from local storage. Let's do it in a proper way. And here I could say return local storage dot, nope, local storage dot get item. And here I can say this dot local storage key. So get the item from local storage key. Here I could say something like items equals, and then I could say return if the items exist. If there are no items, then that's usually null. So if the items exist, then we return them. But we return them by doing json.parse items, or we could call this items str, or we return an empty array. So here we can say get wishlist from local storage. So now I could do something like, hey, this wishlist array is going to be a signal that we get from this. So in this case, we are saying, all right, signal, get the initial value from this. But instead of returning this, we could say dummy wishlist array. So we are saying if there's anything in the local storage, we use that and parse that. If not, then we use the dummy array, and then that becomes the initial value of the signal. So you could also break it like initial wishlist value equals something like this, and then you can do it like this. I mean, you can break it into different variables to make it more readable. Now that I have this, let's try this out. Ooh, we have an error. Why do we have an error? Is this because it tries to get the wishlist array before it happens? Wait a second. Wishlist array is going to be a signal with initial value, but then what happens here? Signal wishlist item. Oh, it should be a settable signal. No, but what? What happened? No, something changed. Wait a second. What was it before? Oh, it should be settable signal. Settable signal? No. Wait a second. What does this return? This should be returning a settable signal, right? So why can't I have this? Import for Angular core. Now it should be happy. So this should not be signal, but rather settable signal. Yeah, makes sense. So now that we have this, let's see if Angular is happy. Yes, it's happy. And if I try to do it now, let's see what happens. So this moment, let's say there was nothing in the local storage. If I refresh, you see the default values. You see the default value in the signal as well. Now I say something new. I hit add. I save it. Now in this case, I would not refresh to the 3 items. It should get the latest one. So let's actually debug this. So I'm going to remove all the breakpoints. Can I remove all the breakpoints? Call stack, this one. So remove all breakpoints, and now I can go to wishlist service, and here now let's see the magic happening. So in here and then in here. So if I refresh now, it tries to go to the wish list. It checks if the local storage has the item. It gets those items, and since it gets those items, it returns those back. The initial value actually becomes the array, the 4 items that we have now, and then it sets it to that. And you can see that we get the 4 items here, and our application local storage is not emptied or refreshed. So if I refresh now, yay, you can see everything works. And I can go ahead and say something like this, hit add. You can see this works. I can mark 1, 2, done. And if I refresh now, would it work? Of course it would. So you can see that now even the first item here is done true, which is A as D, and this here, as you can see. So it's changing the order on the UI, but the data in the local storage still remains the same as we have the wish list. So if I summarize for you what we learned so far, is we learned how to get the value from a signal, which is by calling the method just like this. So you call the signal value. This wishlist array is a signal, and you call the value. You can see this is a settable signal. And whenever you want the value out of it, you call this method. It gives you the value. Whenever you want to change the value of the signal, you use the set method. If you want to have a computed value which is based on a signal, and you want that computed value to regenerate itself or re-render the UI whenever your signal changes, then you could do something like this, what we did here. So in this case, we have the finished count being a computed value that looks into this signal. So whenever the value of wishlist array would change, this computed value would change, which means that every time I would have the right finished count if I mark anything as done or undone, or if I add a new item in general, and that would also work. And then finally, we looked at the effect, and the effect is super powerful. I love it. The effect is in the service, and the effect also essentially is a function or takes a callback function, and it automatically triggers if you are using a signal inside. So I'm using the wishlist signal here to say save this wishlist array to the local storage, and this function, this is all I'm doing. I'm saying save this to local storage, but then as soon as any of the signals inside would change, it would re-trigger this effect. So an effect triggers whenever there's any change in any of the signals being used inside. So I hope this was useful for you. I think you understand all of the processes that we got to know. I think you got a good idea of signals. If you did, type in the chat, let me know. I think the only thing left to do would be just to have this deployed on GitHub, and I think we should be good from there. So I think one of the things that I would want to do is to see ng deploy, for example. So let's actually have a look at the CLI and see the deploy project. So it essentially marks it and sees, all right, how do I deploy this? And that would mostly happen with Angular Fire in this case. I could also look into Angular deploy GH pages, which essentially can work with this. Let's see. So in this case, I could use the GH pages package myself to do it. Let's actually do it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually go to GitHub. Hey, if you're not really following me on GitHub, please do. I'm going to go back. Join about the 734 people who are doing it. Cool people. I know a bunch of them. Not all of them, but I know a bunch of them. So in here, I'm going to add a new repository. I'm going to call this ng signals or ng signals wish list. And in here, I can create it public, no readme required, nothing at all. I'm going to just create it. But I should have created that into the CodewithAhsan repository. I'm going to delete this now. Oops. Let's copy this, paste this, delete this. Oh no, I have to add the code. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yes, let's see. So that. Okay, so that is deleted now. So I need to create a new repository. That should be in CodewithAhsan. That should be ng signals wishlist. I'm going to keep that public, create a repository. And then here I can quickly go ahead and add the remote in this case. So I can go here and say something like clear ls git status git commit. The best commit ever. Speed signals. Here I could say create a wish list with signals. So I can add to it. I can commit this. And then what I would want to do now is to have a git remote add origin, or I have that copied already. Why am I doing this? And then I could say git push u origin main. This should push it. Push, 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 push. There we go. I should be able to see it. Yay, there we go. And finally, what I want to do is just to be able to deploy this. So I'm going to say something like deploy. And here I should say gh pages, dist, dist. And I do want to see what happens when I run npm run build. So I do want to have the gh pages package to be able to deploy this. I could use the Angular. Should I use my own package? I think yes. Ng deploy gh pages actions. Let's see. I think I'm the one who uses it. So I should be able to see, hey, can I please do it? So I can go ahead and say here, I think the folder is called GitHub. Then workflows, and then deploy.yaml, if I'm correct. So if I do it like this, I think I should be able to do it. And then also there should be the latest version should be named this. So this should be like this. Oops. Oops. Nope. So that should be, but it says name all things Angular, and then okay, then it's this. So it uses the 1.4.0. The branch should be main, let's say. And then what do we have? Secrets, build configuration. I don't think so. The project's name should be, if I check the dist, it's called wishlist. So we're going to just go with wishlist. The deploy branch is going to be gh pages, and the Angular dist build folder is going to be yeah, I think this is still going to be the wish list. Okay, I think we should be good. Yes, let's try this. Seller, no, not seller, but rather clear. Clear, git status, git add, git status. There we go. But I don't need to install the gh pages in this case. Should I remove it? Yes, please. And then I could do something like, git add. What did I really add in this case? So deploy YAML, cool. So git commit m ci build added workflow file for GitHub. All right, let's see if this works. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it will. Darvish कह रहे हैं submit कर दिया project. Thank you so much for free course. Really like good vibes. Sorry, form nahi business card. No problem at all. Thank you, Darvish. Thank you, thank you. All right, let's have a look at the actions here. So we do have the edit the workflow for GitHub, blah, blah, blah. Why do I have two of them? Build and deploy one is the same one. Do I have two of them? Wait a second. On branches main, build run on Ubuntu latest, uses blah, 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 uses this with it. I don't know why I have two of them. Can I cancel one of them? Can I cancel? Oh, because it didn't run for the first commit. But that's okay. Let's have a look at this one. Okay, let's hope for the best and see if this works. Starting to commit. It usually never works on the first time, to be honest. Ooh, it works. Yay, 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 awesome, yay. Now let's have a look at the GH pages branch. So if I look at the GH pages, whoa, there we go. So things that I built, let me actually do it like this. Things that I built actually work. I think this should not be a surprise to me, but I think it's that time of the day or that time of the night. So now that we have everything pushed here, I should be actually able to get the value here. And that should be Angular signals example. And here I could have Angular signals TypeScript web development, or just keep it web, save changes. But then also I do also want to have the URL, right? So https code with ahsan.github.io slash was wishlist. Yeah, wishlist. No, it should be ng signal wishlist. Why did I put that? No, because the problem is it's not it's deployed to the wrong URL. That's the problem. So if I click this, site not found. Of course it's not found. ng signal wishlist. The site should still be here, but it wouldn't be there. So index.html, now this one says slash wishlist. This is wrong. So we need to fix it now. All right, so this should be base href ng signals wishlist, because it has to mimic the repository name. No one told me. No one pointed it out. Saved. This wishlist, blah, blah, blah. This folder doesn't match. This folder matches actually. The this folder is good. This is wishlist. This is good. This is not good. Clear git add dot git commit mci. You could say fix ci fix workflow file to target correct base href. Push it. We'll see. Hopefully this would work. But the thing is here, it should still at least give me the URL. It says 404. Is it because I have not enabled pages? Let's see, pages. Yeah, because I have not enabled it. So I have to enable it as well. Deploy from a branch. The branch is going to be gh pages, root, save. Yes, thank you. And now this is going to work. I should actually try for this. GitHub Actions beta. But I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to experiment it later on, then get back to you. But this also then should be the ng signals wishlist and not the wishlist one. Okay. So first of all, we added a new one. Why does it trigger 2 times? Why does this trigger 2 times? That's not good. VS Code, Angular, blah, blah, blah. It should be on push branches, right? And then it just says main. Runs on steps. It checks it out. It does it. But then it... I'm not really sure why does it run 2 times. That's not good. I'm probably going to double check and see what happens. So it stopped it automatically without me canceling it. No. Oh, no, it's... interesting. No, I think it's probably running only for one time. Maybe. I'm not really sure. We'll see. So it says report build status and deploy. So then is it running from my one? We'll see. So this is deployed to GitHub pages. Let's see. There we go. Yay! So we have the default one here. We could add something to it. You can see that this works. I can also change something and I can refresh and you can see everything works here. Yay! If I check the Angular extension now, it should say this is a production build. Yes, we detected application with production configuration. Yes. Cool. So you have actually the access now to the Signals app. And how cool is that? You can see all the coolness of Angular signals here on this page. This is super cool. Someone says Node's front end. Oh, Raja, I think that's because The server is down, maybe. It depends on where you have deployed it. Because Heroku app, oh, because network error. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I think this is because you don't have your backend supporting nodes. So what you should do is look into Express.js course if you have not done it yet. So essentially what you would do is something like this. You would do something like npm install course, then Express, then you say use course. In this course, define your front end URL. That's a better way. If you just do this, then the course enables for every possible page on the internet. We don't want that. So do something like, I think they do have configuring course. Yeah, the origin. So here you can say, hey, the origin of my front end is this one. So you use the course and then you provide the course into the course options. I hope that makes sense. So yes, do that. I hope that makes sense. All right, everyone. So I think I'm going to stop here. So we do have a great idea of the signals. We created an application from scratch with Angular with standalone components. We also looked at signals. We also deployed our application because this is great if you want to show this, for example, for your portfolio or anything. Just follow the tutorial, make it your own, add more styles to it. I don't know, use your own font, the one that you like. But I think I believe this was really helpful for you. So I'm gonna just stop it here, and yes, then I'm gonna actually do something else. Origin be defined किया है फिर भी allow नहीं हो रहा railway पे भी deploy किया है. I think it should work अगर आपका backend deployed है. Try put in some logs to it, because one of the reasons is if the course is not enabled on the backend, then it would cause the errors. Or make sure that you have not implemented as a middleware on some of the routes, but you have implemented it on all of the routes. So still use this configuration, the first one, app use course, okay, and then use create a configuration just like this, and then use this one. So your entire application should be using course. Your entire application should be using course before defining the route. This is also important, so make sure. Oh, typical. I missed the session. Signals sound like a great revive of reactive programming, so need to watch this later. No problem, Marcus. Awesome. Yeah, feel free to look at it and also give any feedback that you have. I think I wanted this to be really specific to signals, but then we started with the front end. We implemented a lot of UI. You can see it looks amazing. We also implemented a bunch of feature, a lot of CSS, cool tricks, a lot of tricks with Angular itself on how to apply styles, apply CSS, blah blah blah. I think it looks decent enough to go with. But yeah, I think signals came towards very end. But yeah, it's actually going to be interesting. It's actually going to be very interesting when this becomes available as stable. So right now it's still in its pre-release sort of, or not pre-release even, but in a very early stage. But I'm absolutely looking forward to how signals would become the primitive or the go-to thing for reactive programming with Angular, specifically when it comes to the inputs and outputs, because we do have observables, we do have other things as well. But it's going to be fun to see how that turns out. But hey, thank you everyone who joined it. I loved having you. I also liked I don't think a lot of people would be here because the time I chose was good for me, but not everybody at Pakistan. But it's still a lot of people joined, so thank you so much for joining. And yeah, keep yourself safe. I would say keep yourself healthy, eat well, drink well, or drink water well at least. And then yes, take care of yourself, take care of your families, and I'm gonna see you later. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.